See Dominic Casey doing on the video that got your attention?
He was digging in the soil. He had a probe, and he was probing in the soil. He was also picking up items at the crime scene and tossing them aside if he felt that.
Well, we can stop with the picking up at the crime scene.
Yes.
He was at the crime scene at one of these locations where he was doing the digging and the probing was at the crime scene. Based on what you saw him doing at the crime scene where the remains were found, could he have possibly disturbed evidence if the body were in fact right where he was doing all these things?
Oh, absolutely, especially in the portion of the video where we see him picking up an item with a stick and examining it and then tossing it aside, and also probing into the earth and just generally mucking about in that area very well could have disturbed the integrity of that crime scene.
Did it look like he knew he was being videotaped?
Oh, absolutely. At one point, there is some direction by Mr. Casey to Mr. Hoover to shoot a certain area or a certain shot.
Did it look like you said he went to another area that looked like an abandoned house. Was there any similarity in those two locations that was getting his attention that he seemed to be focused on?
The point of interest at both of these locations seemed to be a configuration of three rocks or three stones in the soil, and it seemed that that was his point of reference in his search.
You also said that at the area that looked like an abandoned house or abandoned home where the yard was overgrown, it appeared that maybe something was sticking up out of the ground, like a piece of plastic bag or something? And
that's correct. That's correct. Mr. Casey was digging in the area, actually digging with a garden shovel in an area where it appeared to be a black plastic bag sticking out of the earth. And later, the following day, he went back with the probe and was probing that area where it appeared there was a black plastic bag. In addition, at the home, there were a couple of black plastic bags which Mr. Casey is seen cutting those open to examine the contents, what turned out to be yard trash.
And you said that he at the scene, he went back a second day. What was if you could went in all in one thing? The first day he went, what did he do at that scene? At the murder, at the crime scene. The first day he went, what did he do that was most attention for you? And the second day he went back, what did he do that, in your mind, you said, "Wow, why is he doing that at a possible crime?"
The first day he was at the crime scene, there were three things that stood out to me. One, he appeared on the telephone, on his cell phone, and it.
Well, you know what? Don't worry about the cell phone part.
Okay.
You know about that.
All right.
Just as far as physically, the news stuff.
Gotcha.
Physically, what he was doing. You know, the first day he picks up the blanket, the second day he's. So what did he do at the crime scene, the first and the second day, that caught your attention?
The first day he picked up with the stick what appeared to be a blanket, examined it, and then tossed it aside. And then located again the point of reference of the three stones and directed Mr. Hoover to photograph a certain area. The second day at the crime scene, what is significant is that Mr. Casey has a probe and he is probing the earth around again that point of reference of the three stones. And the probe is not just a surface probe. A significant portion of that probe went into the earth as though he is trying to see if there's something that is going to stop the probe from sinking into the earth.
If the body, I don't think it was there, but if the body were in that area where he was doing that, how could he have damaged evidence?
Oh, he could have taken that probe. It was a metal probe, and if he hit the skull or the bones of that skeletal remains, he could have fractured it. He could have otherwise altered it, and it would have thrown the whole forensic examination of the bones off, because there could have been then trauma to the bones that he himself inflicted through his mucking about.
Perfect.
He was digging in the soil. He had a probe, and he was probing in the soil. He was also picking up items at the crime scene and tossing them aside.
WFTV legal analyst Bill Schaefer says the Anthony's private investigator, Dominic Casey, picked up what appeared to be a blanket at the scene and tossed it aside, and that it did not appear that Mr. Casey and his colleague, Private Eye Jim Hoover, who was behind the camera, were doing a random search. Schaefer says the Anthony's private investigator, Mr. Casey, appeared to be focused on areas where there was a configuration of stones or concrete pavers, not just at the crime scene, but also at what appeared to be an abandoned backyard where Mr. Casey was actually digging.
Mr. Casey was digging in the area, actually digging with a garden shovel in an area where it appeared to be a black plastic bag sticking out of the earth.
Schaefer says it was obvious Mr. Casey knew the camera was rolling because he was actually directing Mr. Hoover on where to shoot. Schaefer says back at the scene the second day, Mr. Casey was probing the ground with a metal rod, and not just superficially, but deeply enough that he could have destroyed evidence.
It was a metal probe, and if he hit the skull or the bones of that skeletal remains, he could have fractured it, he could have otherwise altered it, and it would have thrown the whole forensic examination of the bones off.
Now, the big questions tonight still are, who was Mr. Casey talking to on the cell phone at the scene, and who told him where to search and what to look for? Information that only the murderer or someone close to the murderer would know. Reporting live in Orange County, Kathy Bellich, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
Kimberly Guilfoyle, our prosecution, former prosecutor, our expert, our primetime member. What you want to give us your response to this tape?
Well, I think what we're seeing is a lot of close-ups here of this area. You see a lot of debris, but one thing we were commenting on here, Geraldo, you don't see any water in this area. And again, we've seen 2 days, November 15th and November 16th, according to the timestamp. So you see debris in the area, the blanket that you mentioned. We have to kind of see the larger context as to the exact area where this is taking place. But I am pretty shocked that, Linda is seeing this here again on your show instead of having this already in the discovery, which, I believe as a former prosecutor, they should have this.
Brad Conway, I believe, the attorney for the Anthony family. Are you on the telephone, Brad? Hello, Brad.
Geraldo, can you hear me?
I can now, yes. All right, we're looking, Brad, at this tape of a search done by your two guys, Dominic Casey, hired by the Anthonys, and Jim Hoover, a volunteer, of a search of an area they say is exactly the same place where the body was ultimately found a month later. How did you know? How did the Anthony family know to search this place?
Well, first of all, Mr. Casey, Dominic Casey, was following up on statements that had been made. One of them was from Kaya Marie Cruz, and there were other numerous statements that described this area as a spot where Casey and her friends used to hang out as young people. And I think Linda and Kimberly both bring up a good point, which is this videotape was shot November 15th and 16th.
November 15th and November 16th.
Correct. Or should have been. And you said earlier in the spot that it was date stamped in December.
No, it is date stamped November 15th and November 16th.
And that would be the videotape that was taken on the 2 days that they were out.